Joe Rogan has posted thousands of podcast episodes. Most of them are exactly what they appear to be: long, unfiltered conversations with interesting people about interesting subjects. But occasionally, something else is happening. A guest comes on with a specific agenda, a narrative to plant, a truth to conceal, or they simply reveal, through discomfort, deflection, or contradiction, that their publicly stated views are not entirely their own. The 3-hour format is unforgiving in a way that most media is not. You cannot stay on message for 3 hours. Eventually, something slips. Eventually, Joe asks the question you didn't prepare for. Eventually, the cameras catch your face doing something your words are trying not to do. Today, we go through the most significant examples. Documented, on-camera moments where guests revealed more than they intended. Some are obvious once you know what to look for. Others require paying close attention. Let's get into it. Paul Stamets is one of the world's leading mycologists. He has written foundational books on fungi. He runs a successful supplements company. He has worked with government biodefense programs since 9/11. He has been a recurring guest on the podcast and is generally considered a credible, knowledgeable figure, which is why what happened during his second appearance was so striking. Deep into a wide-ranging conversation about mushrooms, Joe casually mentioned portobello mushrooms. Stamets' entire demeanor changed.
And that puts my life in danger. So I reserve the right not to answer your question.
Whoa. I didn't expect that. It puts your life in danger talking about portobello mushrooms? He's looking at me silently. I will respectfully move on.
Thank you.
So anybody who's interested, just Google that and get back to me. You know what? Next, I'm going to have a guy.
Joe was visibly caught off guard. Portobello mushrooms put your life in danger? The scientific basis for concern is real. Portobellos contain compounds called agaritines, which can convert to potentially carcinogenic substances, particularly when eaten raw. Stamets had actually stated this publicly in 2006, comparing eating raw portobellos to smoking cigarettes in terms of carcinogenic risk. So the information exists. He has said it before. Why the dramatic reaction? The most straightforward theory is commercial. The global mushroom market is worth approximately $50 billion. Stamets has significant influence over that market and significant financial interests within it. Saying portobellos are dangerous is not good for business, but there is a darker layer of context. Stamets was once close friends with Stephen Pollock, a notable mycologist who was murdered in 1981 under circumstances that were never fully resolved. Pollock was shot during what appeared to be a robbery. 3 suspects were identified. The district attorney refused to prosecute. All 3 suspects died as free men. A recording allegedly captured police officers discussing their own involvement in the murder. But the tape sat hidden for 30 years because the person who had it was terrified of what would happen if the wrong people found out. When Stamets says discussing certain mushrooms could put his life in danger, he has first-hand experience of what happens to people inside dangerous research circles. He has seen what the government does with this territory. Whether his reaction was about commercial interests, genuine paranoia rooted in real experience, or something else entirely, it remains one of the most genuinely mysterious moments in the podcast's history. In June 2025, FBI Director Kash Patel appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast. He spent approximately 20 minutes explaining why everyone should accept the official Epstein story and move on. He had seen the prison tape. The case was pretty benign. Very little left to expose. Then Elon Musk, live on X during the episode, dropped a specific claim. Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That is the real reason they have not been made public. Joe read the tweet out loud on air. The camera caught Patel's face in the moment he realized what was happening.
I don't know how he would, but I'm just staying out of the Trump-Elon thing. That's way outside my lane.
What the fuck are they doing?
I know my lane, and that ain't it.
I just don't. I mean, I understand he owns Twitter. I think it's bad for your mental health.
The director of the FBI, conducting their investigation into Epstein, staying out of a specific claim about what is in the Epstein files. The context makes this more significant. Just 2 years before his FBI appointment, Patel was publicly demanding the Epstein client list be released. He appeared on multiple podcasts, stating that powerful people, he named Bill Gates specifically, were lobbying to prevent disclosure. His book is titled Government Gangsters and explores FBI corruption. He vowed before his appointment to shut down the FBI building and reopen it as a museum of the deep state.
They're sitting on it. That doesn't seem like something you should do. You're protecting the world's foremost predator. That seems like an evil thing to do, regardless of who may be embarrassed in the release of that list. Why is the FBI protecting the greatest pederast, the largest scale pederast in human history?
Simple, because of who's on that list. Pants, and let us know who the pedophiles are.
This is way off the topic, but who has Jeffrey Epstein's
Black Book?
Black Book?
FBI.
But who? That is that. I mean, there's.
That's under direct control of the director of the FBI.
After his appointment, a complete transformation. In a congressional hearing, he stated publicly that he had rejected QAnon-based conspiracy theories outright. Then the FBI Epstein investigation concluded with the Bureau announcing they found no incriminating client list, no evidence of blackmail, and no plans to charge anyone else. The gap between who Kash Patel was before he had the power to provide transparency and who he became after is one of the more observable transformations in recent political history. And Joe Rogan's podcast caught the exact moment his official position collided with a live specific public challenge he could not have anticipated. Mike Baker is a former CIA officer who has become a Fox News contributor and has appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast approximately 20 times. He is affable, candid-seeming, and disarmingly willing to admit to controversial CIA activities, which is precisely the point.
That's what we're doing, right? Of course we're trying to influence hearts and minds. Of course we're infiltrating organizations to try to influence the direction of the government.
Or this classic where he confesses to stealing state secrets.
It's like John Brennan, who was a director at the agency. He talked about the business of the CIA and says we don't steal secrets. God damn it, of course we steal secrets. That's the point of the exercise, right?
Intelligence professionals have a term for this technique, a limited hangout. You reveal partial truths to establish credibility. You admit to the things that are already known or strongly suspected. You take the sting out of revelations by acting like everyone already knows. Of course we overthrow governments. Of course we steal secrets. What did you expect? By normalizing the enterprise, you simultaneously satisfy people looking for honesty, while protecting deeper information they would not accept as casually. Baker is currently CEO of Diligence LLC, a private intelligence firm. He sits on the board of Newbridge Strategies, connected to the Bush administration. His company has ties to former CIA Director William Webster. Whether you describe Diligence LLC as a CIA-connected firm or simply as a private intelligence company staffed by former agency personnel is a matter of characterization. What is documented is Baker's background, his current professional affiliations, and the specific rhetorical technique he deploys on the podcast with remarkable consistency, appearing to reveal everything while actually controlling exactly what lands. 20-plus appearances. That is not a coincidence. That is a strategy. David Grusch is a former military intelligence officer with 14 years of experience, including positions at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and the National Reconnaissance Office. He was tasked by Congress to investigate UAPs for the Pentagon. When he came forward as a whistleblower, claiming the U.S. government has been running crash retrieval programs for non-human origin vehicles, recovering what he described as dead alien pilots, people listened. His credentials were real. He was making these claims under oath to Congress.
And, biologics or, dead pilots, if you will, even though it's, kind of creepy to even think about that in your worldview. You don't think they were ever, alive sometimes too, right? And I'll leave it at that only because that is something, the president and his cabinet need to disclose this in a controlled manner. Going back to that amendment, I'm not here to, push the subject in an improper way. And that sounds like, why don't you just do it, Dave? I'm like, there's a lot of secondary and tertiary ramifications.
Joe spent 3 hours with him. And afterward, Joe himself raised the question that many viewers had been turning over.
How do you know whether or not they're just using him as a useful idiot to just get out some silly story because they're covering up for the fact that there's some very advanced drone system that the United States government has that they're trying to keep under wraps?
Right.
This framing has historical precedent. A Department of Defense review found that in the 1980s, an Air Force colonel visited a bar near Area 51 and gave the owner fake photos of flying saucers, the goal being to generate UFO rumors around the already secretive military base to conceal the F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter program. Using UFOs to cover advanced military technology is documented government practice, which makes every sincere UFO whistleblower, regardless of their credibility and intentions, potentially serving a function they may not be aware of. Joe's instinct, that both things could be true simultaneously, is probably the most honest position available. Zahi Hawass is Egypt's former Minister of Antiquities, the person responsible for overseeing access to the pyramids, tombs, and archaeological sites for decades. He has appeared in countless National Geographic documentaries. His Joe Rogan appearance was, by Joe's own assessment afterward, the worst podcast he ever recorded. When Joe brought up satellite imagery suggesting potential hidden chambers beneath the pyramids, Hawass dismissed it without engaging the specifics. When Joe mentioned Göbekli Tepe, the 11,000-year-old complex in Turkey that fundamentally challenged assumptions about ancient civilization, Hawass initially denied its existence, then denied its significance, then redirected to Egypt.
Most of the information that's written on pyramids are wrong.
Most of it?
Most of it.
In archaeology books?
In archaeology books.
Really?
Except me and Mark Leaner.
You guys are the only ones that have it right?
Because have been working in Giza for the last 57 years of my life. I excavated every bit of sand.
And Joe Rogan later referred to this podcast as the worst one he ever did.
Was this the pad that Zahi was using right here? This one?
Maybe. That might have been the worst podcast I've ever done. But maybe a good one, too. Just to see, okay, this is the guy, this is this closed-minded fellow that's been in charge of gatekeeping all of the knowledge about
And
Egypt.
still standing on the same ideas.
Every question was answered with a variation of, I investigated it and found it's wrong, or the answer is in my book. He came across not as a scientist engaging with alternative theories, but as an institutional gatekeeper, whose entire professional identity required those theories to be wrong. Whether his closed-mindedness reflected genuine conviction, institutional pressure, or simply decades of being the most powerful voice in a field where dissent gets punished, the effect was identical. The person with the most access to the evidence was the person least willing to examine it honestly. Adam Conover built his entire brand on debunking popular misconceptions. His show was literally called Adam Ruins Everything. He presents as someone who questions received wisdom and follows evidence wherever it leads. When Joe pressed him on biological differences in athletic performance and the specific question of transgender athletes in women's sports, the debunker found himself unable to debunk a single specific argument Joe made. Joe laid out detailed biological data: bone density affected by 30 years of testosterone, tendon strength, mechanical advantages of male hip structures. Adam's responses were consistently vague and repeatedly deferred to his trans friends, as though personal relationships constituted a counter-argument to physiological data.
The sports were designed for male bodies, right? They're optimized for male bodies, right? Basketball, for example, right?
How is that optimized for male bodies?
It's like the height of the basket, the way that the ball moves around,
the ball moves around.
If we're gonna say that,
He appeared to realize mid-sentence how that sounded. He started laughing. Then afterward, he went directly onto another streaming platform and complained that Joe had turned it into a boxing match. What Conover demonstrated was a specific kind of intellectual capture. Someone who questions everything except the assumptions embedded in their own ideological community. When those core beliefs were stress-tested by someone willing to push back specifically and ask for evidence, the entire debunking apparatus collapsed into appeals to authority and identity. This one is perhaps the most straightforwardly documented moment on the entire list. CNN's chief medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, appeared on the podcast. Joe asked him directly about CNN describing his ivermectin prescription as horse dewormer, when it was a human prescription written by a doctor.
Just outright lied about me taking horse dewormer.
They shouldn't have said that.
Why did they do that?
I don't know.
You didn't ask? You didn't think that was you're the medical guy over there.
I didn't ask. I should have asked before
coming on
your podcast.
But they did it with such glee.
No,
yes,
Joe.
they did. I watched.
You watched?
I watched.
You watched? No, I don't think there's
yes,
glee.
They did.
No one takes...
Joe Rogan says he has COVID, taking livestock drug despite warnings. Yeah.
Jamie had to pull this up.
You want to play it?
Does she
this
have
is
glee?
Your news network.
I'm going to watch.
Let's see.
I'm going to watch.
Rogan telling his 13 million Instagram followers that he was treated with several drugs, and he included ivermectin on the list, a drug used for livestock. The FDA and the CDC warn against using to treat COVID.
Turns out I got COVID.
Look, they put a yellow filter on me
too.
too.
The kitchen sink got it. All kinds of meds. Monoclonal
You see the original video versus that? I look like shit there.
Z-Pack.
Do you know that?
I think you look good.
Pause. It's enough.
Prednisone.
That's enough, Jamie.
I don't think Aaron had glee.
Oh, well, it's more Brian Stelter was the gleeful one. But the point is, that's a lie.
It can be used for humans. I get it. I totally...
Not just could be used for humans, is often used for humans along with all the other drugs I took, all human drugs.
Yes.
They know it's a human drug.
It's right. But
they lied.
The thing...
It's defamatory.
It is, yeah, they shouldn't have done that.
It's defamatory, right?
Well, I don't know if it's defamatory.
I bet it is.
Well, I'm not a lawyer.
It's a lie.
Well, see, here's the thing. You can have nuanced discussions about this, right?
They shouldn't have said that. The chief medical correspondent of CNN, on the world's biggest podcast, admitting that his network lied about Joe's medication. The following night, Don Lemon was on CNN defending the horse dewormer characterization. Technically true that ivermectin is used for horses, completely missing the point that it is also a human medication that was prescribed by a doctor. Gupta had admitted it was wrong. His own network ignored the admission and continued the characterization anyway. That sequence, the admission on the podcast, the institutional gaslighting the following night, captured something about how media institutions operate when their narratives are challenged from the inside. Dr. Michael Osterholm appeared on Joe Rogan in March 2020 with specific predictions about COVID that proved largely accurate. 480,000 deaths, 48 million hospitalizations. He had written about China as the likely source of the next pandemic 3 years earlier in a book published in 2017. His organization had been partnering with Homeland Security since 2003. When he returned in 2022, the dynamic had shifted. Joe had become significantly more skeptical about pandemic policy, lab leak theories, and institutional responses. Osterholm remained consistent, engaging Joe's skeptical questions without changing his position. What makes Osterholm's appearances interesting in context is the contrast with how other institutional guests behaved. He did not deflect. He did not perform discomfort. He engaged the questions on their merits and held his ground when challenged, which suggests the problem is not always hidden agendas. Sometimes it is simply the opposite. Someone so embedded in institutional thinking that alternative framings genuinely do not compute. 3 hours is a long time. Long enough to see whether someone is performing their views or living them. Long enough to catch the face that doesn't match the words. Long enough for a live tweet from Elon Musk to arrive and trap the FBI director in real time. Joe Rogan's podcast has become culturally significant precisely because of this. The format punishes performance. It rewards authenticity. And occasionally, it catches something that nobody planned to reveal. A mycologist, too, afraid to discuss a mushroom. An FBI director who once demanded transparency going silent the moment he could actually provide it. A former CIA officer admitting to everything except the things that actually matter. A chief medical correspondent admitting his network lied about medication, while his network ignored the admission the following night. These are not conspiracy theories. They are documented, on-camera moments that tell you something honest about the people and institutions involved. Pay attention. The tells are there for anyone willing to look. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't. And we'll see you next time.